All right. As usual, this Tuesday, we discuss an aspect of the Pasha based on the Rebbe's Sichos. And then, as you always point out, the most important aspect of learning in general and Hasidus in particular, and discussing the Rebbe's Sicha, is essentially to finding ourselves within its lines to see what way that speaks to us. This parsha, as you all know, is a parsha that begins about korbanos. And there are two interesting points. Actually, there are two distinct sichos, but there is a relationship between them. The first is that immediately calls your attention. This parsha begins with Vayikrah el Moshe. Vayikrah el Moshe means Hashem called Moshe. The calling indicates a very special attention, very special relationship. Rashi immediately explains. Vayikra indicates a special affinity, a special warmth, which is uniquely applicable and given only to Nevi'im, to Nevi Yisrael, to Moshe Rabbeinu in particular. As we could see later on by Bilam, who was also a Navi, it says clearly Vayikor. It doesn't say Vayikor, it says Vayikor. It's the same word, Vayikor. And yet over there, it stops short of saying he called him. It says he chanced to meet with him, Vayikor. He chanced upon him. Vayikra is more than just a meeting in a prearranged situation. Vayikra means that even if you are not where I am, I'm going to call you to come to me. The implication there is that I'm going to look you up. I'm not going to talk to you because I met you in shul. Yeah, I remember. I wanted to talk to you. Right? I call you. Which we will try to enrich a little bit. And then Vayikra is also spelled with a small aleph, which is a classic question. Why Vayikra is with a small aleph? Small aleph. In the Torah, there are the overwhelming majority of letters are what's called average letters. They're all equal signs. Then there is in the entire Torah means Chomisha Kumshe Torah, all the 24 books. The Nevi'im and Ksurim all together, there is a set of aleph base with small letters, and a set of aleph base with extra large letters.
Only one set.
Only one set. So the aleph, Vayikra, is the aleph of the small set. And there is the aleph of the large set, is in Divrei Hayomim. I don't know if you know Divrei Hayomim, that's the Chronicles. And over there, the first word in Divrei Hayomim is Odom, and Odom is spelled with a large aleph. Odom Shei Semish, that's the name.
Just thinking of the Rosh Hashanah, Adam Shesa, Isha. I mean, no, it's not Isha.
No, it's
sorry.
not.
Sounded good though.
Shucks.
What does it say in the pasuk in Divrei Yomim?
Divrei Hayomim is a chronicle of the entire quote-unquote history, you know,
Right.
till the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, and begins from the beginning of time. What's the beginning of time? So there's a sikha. Our Rebbe related a sikha, discussed once a sikha that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave, and it said that the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Alter Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe took care of the chinuch of the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson. You know, basically the story of the Tzemach Tzedek, that his mother had given her life away in order to save the Alter Rebbe's life, so that he should be able to finish the job of establishing the Chassidus Chabad. And Alter Rebbe promised her that he will take care of the Tzemach Tzedek, her little boy, son. He was less than 3 years old, and give him the proper chinuch. And the Alter Rebbe actually was his mechanech. He took care of him, he watched him on every step. The Tzemach Tzedek slept in his room and so forth. So when Tzemach Tzedek became 3 years old, so he was ushered into a cheder, and then Alter Rebbe told his Melamed that he should begin to teach him the Aleph Beis, teach him in general from Vayikrah. It's a custom by Yidden that we start the first lesson that boys have in cheder is from Vayikrah. Then they go to Bereshis, but the first lesson is in Vayikrah. There are many reasons for that. And after the cheder, Tzemach Tzedek came back to the Alter Rebbe. Tzemach Tzedek asked the Alter Rebbe, why is the Aleph in Vayikra small? And the Rebbe describes it that the Alter Rebbe became pensive for a long time, for an extended time. And our Rebbe explains the principle behind that is because the Alter Rebbe was not just going to give Tzemach Tzedek an answer. He was going to give him a directive, something that would set him on the path of Avodas Hashem. Because that's what the Alter Rebbe's responsibility was, to be mechanech. And afterwards, the Alter Rebbe said to him that Adam Rishon was the greatest of men. He was what's called the Tzir Kabel Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Even his physical presence in the world was directly constructed by Hashem. Not like everyone else. The neshama comes from Hashem, but the body comes from his parents. And by Adam, his body also was constructed by Hashem. And therefore he was a super person. And this is why his name is spelled in Divrei Hayom with a big Aleph. Because he was this big person, this unique status of a human being. However, because Adam Rishon was great, and because that he was aware of his greatness, he recognized his greatness, although he was in fact great. But this awareness of his greatness led him to make a mistake, and he actually slipped into the transgression of Eitz Hadas. but he ate from the Eitz Hadas.
Because he recognized his own greatness.
Because he recognized his own greatness. Moshe Rabbeinu, on the other hand, also knew his greatness, but his greatness and his awareness of his greatness did not result of a big olive. On the contrary, it reflected in a small olive. Why? The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that Moshe Rabbeinu had reflected to himself. It is true, and that he recognizes all the great gifts and all the great privileges and the great levels that he had accomplished. But upon reflection, he thought to himself, as the Rebbe explains, who was my father? Amram. Who was this guy's father? Whoever. Where did I learn? By this person, and so forth. And the natural gifts that the Rebbe gave him. So Moshe Rabbeinu reflected that if someone else would have gotten the similar privileges, the similar opportunities that he did, this other person would have accomplished more than himself. And therefore he was constantly in a state of humility. As the Pasuk says, that Moshe Rabbeinu was humble, excessively humble, more than all other people in the world. He was humble, not because he was fooling himself that this other person is greater than him. But his humility came from the fact that he did not take credit for his greatness. And he always felt that if someone else would have been given the similar opportunities and gifts, he would have been a reason to a high madrig. This is the contrast. Moshe Rabbeinu and Odom. So the Rebbe goes on to explain that this greatness of Odom Arishin, despite the fact that he explains the various expressions and so forth that are given to us, that despite the fact that there was this so to speak, quote unquote, negativity resulted from his greatness, his greatness nevertheless reflected itself in him. And this is the greatness that he bestowed to all the Yid. And every Yid has an aspect that's a nitzutz of the neshama of Odom Arish, which reflects a big olive, a greatness. And thus, when the Torah begins in this Pasha Vayikrah, the Torah begins to speak about korbanos. What is the reference in korbanos? Odom ki yakriv mikem korban Hashem. It immediately alludes to the fact that all Yidden are reflective and representative of Odom. Odom Arish. And because they reflect the Odom Arish, this is why they have this capability of bringing korbanos. Yaakov mekem korban Hashem. So we want to discuss this element. What are the special requirements to bring a korban? And what does it mean that Eden are reflective of Odom Arish? We discussed this more than once with the following approach. And we ask ourselves, this question that was became a kind of a parable. What would the world be if there were no human beings? We were challenged with this question many times. What would the world be if it had everything that it currently has, but there were no human beings? Generally speaking, the response that I got is that that world without human beings is not worthy of being called a world. It has no significance whatsoever. I had different kind of responses. What's the point? There's nothing to it, whatever it is. But ultimately, there's nothing to it. There's no reality to it. And then, when we project the reality that the world does have a human being in it, so that the world went on for 5 days, 5.5 days, till Adam Rishon's creation, the world was without human beings. All the animals were roaming the fields, the fish, all the Leviathan, and all the various. Nothing is happening. And then, at the end of this, in the middle of the sixth day, Adam Rishon came on the scene. And Hashem said, "Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu." We will make an Adam who will reflect us in our form and our likeness. And this one human being came on the scene. That changed the entire perspective of the world. That gave the world a respectable reality. I don't want to repeat this, we discussed it. Every one of us has this is important, innate intelligence. This is called intelligence. This is not something that you have to pick up a book and look up in the encyclopedia. Okay, what would be if the world didn't have a human being? This is the innate intelligence that comes from our human soul, our Jewish soul. We all recognize this reality. That the human being is what makes the world a reality, and worthy of its being there, worthy of being called Mevish's creation. Otherwise, what is the Mevish doing? Wasting his time. Once we realize this is what happens. You learn that in Chassidus that there is Chochmah and there is Bina. What is Chochmah? Chochmah is the initial spark. Where does this initial spark come from? If you didn't have a chance to study and reflect and all that, where does this spark come from? It comes directly from your soul. This is what the human soul says. And in your Chochmah, in your wisdom, you can reflect it. You recognize it. And in Chochmah, you immediately, instantaneously say, nothing there. Once you have this recognition there's nothing there, and then when there's a human being added to the world, then you say, oh, nothing, now it's worthy, now there is something there. Now you have an opportunity to focus in and reflect. Why did you say that without the human being there's nothing there? And with the presentation of the human being, there is something significant. How the human being change the scene? What happened? So for those of you by whom this is not the first question, you already went through this exercise. For those of you from whom this is the first time, so I urge you to go through the exercise now. But we have to reflect. This is our own intelligence. It's not something that I presented you from a book. This is something I asked you the question, what do you think? And this is your answer. That means that you, as a human being, as a Yid, have this sense. If you have this sense, that means that you have a sense what you are stand for. Because you are a human being. You are Adam. In this Sikha that I mentioned to you about Adam, the Rebbe goes on to say that from the Alter Rebbe's response to the Tzemach Tzedek, clearly the Alter Rebbe did not intend to downgrade Adam Morish. That's definitely not the Alter Rebbe's intent under any circumstances. Certainly not when he's teaching his 3-year-old grandson. What is contained in this answer? That every Yid must reflect both things. He must have the element of Moshe Rabbeinu, the element of humility. Element of humility, the Alter Rebbe, the Rambam explains it's very, very important in person because it's a very easy threshold to miss, and then you lose yourself, in, so to speak, in self-aggrandizement and appreciation. On the other hand, one must not lose sight of who he truly is. What he really represents, which is the element of Adam, which is what makes the world a world. I'd like to kind of take you along in a following, so to speak, projection, intellectual projection. And this is just real. If there is no human being, and then you are put in the middle of the world, you, this little human being that I am, would that change the scene? Of course it would. In other words, with all our shortcomings, with all our weaknesses, we are, as the Pasuk says, we are the center. We are what justifies the creation of the world. We are what the world was created for. We have, Baruch Hashem, a nation, a national spread, but every individual, as an individual, also has that quality. But the Gemara says, Lefikach nivra ha'adam yechidi. The reason that Adam was created yechidi, just one, not multiple, it is to tell us that one who enhances, who saves one human being, is as if he had saved the whole world. And God forbid if someone destroys one human being, it's like he would destroy the whole world. A whole world.
What's the Rambam says this? So who says this? Rambam?
It's in Gemara, it's a Mishnah. I think this is in Vayikrah.
I'm sure yours.
I'm not mistaken, it's in Pirkei Avos. It's written in Mishnah. So Lefikach nivra ha'adam yechidi. Why is it what?
That a person changes the whole...
Okay, now we're coming back to the question. Again, you're asking me, I'm asking you. Because that is where the real power is hidden. Just as you were able to answer that without a human being the world is nothing. From that very source, and that says with a human being the world is something, if you focus in whatever degree, you would be able to recognize what's behind your own conception, your own comprehension of this truth. And I'll help you to elaborate, of course. But the point is, Don't listen to my words, listen to your own thinking and see if that fits my words. If my words are talking to you. You understand what I'm saying? If I'm going to give you a piece of information that you don't relate to, then it's useless. Now, that's not what I'm intending. I'm going to help you, so to speak, understand your own thinking. What, in fact, is the difference? And in order to explain it, in order to, so to speak, demonstrate it, I'm going to also use other parables, which we already employed here in our discussions. Just to so to speak, to focus in and to manifest what a human being is, how a human being is unique versus everything else in the world. There are many aspects that can be brought in this way. I'll take a very simple one. The very simple one is that the Gemara says, "Odom she'ein lo bayis ein lo odom," which means a person, a human being, doesn't have a home, is not a human being. What does it mean he doesn't have a home? Now, I'd like to examine the whole concept. What is a home to a human being? And how is it different than the abode, the living quarters, quote unquote, of animals? They also have their place of where they live. Whatever it is in their caves and their trees makes it different. They're turf. The lions established their turf, their area. You know, this square area, this belongs to this group, and pity any creature passing through this area. They're not going to come out alive. Right? This is a well-known rule in the jungle. And what's the difference? A human being has his home, and lahadul, the animal has his abode. Now, please follow this. In the home, a person does all kinds of different things. For one thing, he sleeps there, he eats there, he relaxes there, he reads, he learns, he meets his friends there. All kinds of different things. He stores his possessions. Now, all of these things that I mentioned, which are in the category of function, they're all functional elements in a person's life. A person must have a place to eat, must sleep, must have a place must read, must learn, whatever he has to do. All of these functional elements can be accomplished fully and well without a home. A person can sleep in a hotel, and he can sleep, if he can afford it, he can sleep in a luxurious hotel. But everything is going to be taken, he doesn't even have to wash his linen, it's going to be taken care of. A person can eat in a restaurant, he doesn't even have to bother peeling the potatoes. Right? A person can, as a matter of fact, I mentioned to you, many years back, we had a guest in the house. Whatever this Bacher, he became Baal Tshuva, whatever his background is, not important. The point is, he had this short-sighted mentality. He said to me, he says, I cannot appreciate the value of owning books. Because by us, every course it has a wall of books. That's a minimum, right? You can't get married if you don't have a wall of books. So, I can't appreciate the value of buying books. Any book you want. Go right into the library, take the book out, read it from cover to cover 3 times over and bring it back. What's the point of owning a book? I'd like you to understand and reflect on this. And our Rebbe said, no, buy a smaller sforim. Every house has to be full of sforim. And everybody readily understands it themselves. Right? To eat in a restaurant, to sleep in a hotel, and to go to the library to get a sefer is not, it's functionally it's perfectly okay. But at that point, the human being with his wisdom, even though he's infinitely superior in wisdom sense to an animal, he lives with the mentality of an animal. Which means he does not really have a place in the world. He has all kinds of functions, but he doesn't have a place. To put it in other words, he does not have a sense of reality. He's a visitor in the world. He's not for real. He's a visitor. With seichel, with all his faculties and wisdom and everything else. He doesn't really have a sense that he belongs to the world and the world belongs to him. It's being a visitor. That is the mentality of the animals, of everything else in the world. Like the lion has his turf, the birds have their nest, every animal has provide for their young and all that. It is all on the functional level. They provide for things that they need at the moment. Fish, certain times of the year, they surface up to the shore and they lay their eggs and go back into the water. You know this. This is all functional. A sense of reality. That there is a piece of the world that belongs to me and that the world is real, beyond functionality, exists only with the human being. And what does this element, this sense of reality in the human being reflect? Where does the human being get it from? Now we're coming to the core of the question. This was all to illustrate, where you can see, so to speak, tangibly, a difference in the way the human being relates to things, to his life, and the way an animal handles. What is the essential difference? What is the basis of that difference? Again, I'm asking you the question, but I'm going to help you to decipher your own thinking. Every animal, everything in the world, as I said, is essentially a stranger in this world. All they want from the world is to satisfy their needs. I need to eat, so I have to go out and find food. Otherwise, who cares about the whole world? I have no idea where it's coming from. I don't care where it's going. They view the world as no man's land. In other words, jungle, a wilderness, coming from nowhere, going nowhere. As far as I'm concerned, the only thing I'm interested in is It provides me with my sustenance, my food. The human being was imbued, was granted a godly perspective. God created the world. This was not an inadvertent creation. It was an intentional creation. Nothing happened inadvertently. This intent, this reality that's in the creation, this is what the human being reflects. He, with his soul, recognizes the godly presence in the world. What is the godly presence in the world? This sense of reality, this sense of intent, of creation. It doesn't just happen. It didn't happen by the big boom, whatever it's called. A human being is not the result of molecules. A human being is a neshama, a godly neshama. And not only the human being, the whole world has a godly force behind it that keeps it going. Now we have spring, the seasonal cycle and daily cycle and the yearly cycle, everything. There's intent, there is a force behind it. This is the godly presence. Who recognizes this as a force rather than an inadvertent cycle? Only the human being. He's the only one who's capable of recognizing this. Because he has seichel, he has this intelligence, he has this neshama that is sensitive to this truth, because he has a godly spark in him. Because he can recognize what's called a true presence, not a functional presence. Please understand now, you can see the difference. Not just a functional presence, but a true presence. That's what the Gemara says. Adam, a human being, who does not have a bayis, Adam she'ein lo bayis, he doesn't have a home. Ein lo Adam. What's meant ein lo Adam? He's not alive. Ein lo Adam means he's not a human being. What does it mean? He's not alive? Of course he's not alive. He doesn't eat? Of course he eats. He does not sleep? He sleeps. He doesn't learn? He can learn. The human being was placed in the world, as the Pasuk says, Pru, Urvu, Umilu Zoretz V'chivshu. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and conquer it. Capture the earth. The Eibishter, Hashem created the world and rendered it into the possession, a human possession, and said to the human being, this is yours. By my decree. You own the world because I, the Creator, have rendered it to you. And I rendered it to you so that you humanize it. You make a human world out of this jungle. You claim it. Obviously, there's much that we can elaborate on this. This is, so to speak, in a nutshell, the principle. And this is what the Pasuk says. Adam, when it comes to bringing a korban, what is a korban? Let's reflect very briefly. We can't go very, very far, but it's an odd thing. You take an animal, you shecht it, put it on this bech and burn it up. And this is all to, so to speak, atone for your misdeeds. Right? So, but what's going on over here? You finally a scapegoat? What is this animal? How is this animal responsible for your misdeeds? Let the animal be. In fact, our enlightened brethren, who who have become sort of acquired, so to speak, a modern perception of life. Right? Who see the world from a scientific and intellectual perspective, says, what? This is, take an animal and kill it and burn it there. That doesn't seem right. I was once talking to a conservative rabbi. Rabbi, you know,
That's great.
That's great.
he was a decent guy. He says, Rabbi, do you really think that people revert back to the old, what is it called? Well, whatever it is, the old, a lowly perception of reality, that we will take animals, we'll burn them on the altar. Doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem right. Tell it to the animal rights people. They'll eat you up alive. Says the animal should take you and put it on the altar.
No, they'll eat a human up alive and not an animal.
I'm sorry?
They'll eat a human up alive and not an animal.
Care more about animals than human beings.
They would eat animal alive.
How is the animal an atonement? What is the connection? What is the sense of it? The Chassidus and the Zohar and the Kabbalah, they're brief terms. It says, Rosa de Kurban Oila Rosa de Yisov. Rosa de Kurban is the secret, the inner significance of Korbanos rises all the way to the ultimate highest levels. So again, we will limit our discussion, to both by time and degree, but the principle that we need to recognize is, in order to bring a korban, you have to recognize that you are Adam, first and foremost. And if you did a sin, and then you want to bring a korban, not because you're concerned about having offended God, then committed a sin and brought impurity into the world or so forth. You just don't want to be held accountable for it, and then you bribe God with an animal. If that's your attitude, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. That's not what a korban is. In other words, if a korban has only a functional relationship to God, is only on a functional level, you don't belong here. The first thing is Odom. That's what the pasuk says. Odom ki yakriv mikem. Odom means that you recognize that you are a direct godly creation and you have a godly perception of reality. And you recognize the whole world as belonging to God. And you upon this earth are the only one who can recognize this and who can bring this to full recognition, to full revelation. So that you are the only one who recognizes that, who can not only recognize, who can actually relate to the whole world as being God's possession, God's property. And the whole world, it's not just my personal status. If I committed a sin, if I failed, I have thereby brought impurity upon the whole world. Because the whole world is the human being. And my concern is not just about myself. My concern, in fact, is for the entire creation. because that's what it is. I own the whole creation. It was rendered in my possession, my responsibility. Thus, a korban is reflective of the principle that the whole world actually continues to belong to God. And by bringing a korban, you are making that statement, you're refreshing that statement, which is the opposite of a sin. A sin is where you can act independently without recognizing the godly presence. A korban can only be brought if you recognize fully not only the godly presence but the godly possession, ownership and rulership. And this is the principle. It says, Odom ki yakri mikem. The first principle that a human being must recognize, despite the fact that Odom has recognized his greatness, and therefore he has a big aleph, and therefore it's possible to mislead him. He must not forget of who he is. He must at the same time remember that you should be humble. But this humility must not overwhelm, must not undermine the true significance of what he is. One more sentence. Much of human failing is the result of not appreciating what a human being is, not having respect for the human mission, for the human purpose. This is why the halacha, the Shulchan Aruch speaks not only about transgressions or mitzvahs specifically, don't rob, don't kill, and don't do anything wrong, and do the mitzvahs, put on tefillin and so forth. But absolutely every aspect of human life is directed by the Shulchan Aruch. Like we always say, derech eretz. Remember this was derech eretz. Derech eretz means common sense. Derech eretz means respect. Respect for human life. Respect. I'm not talking about actual transgression. Respect. Kodmu l'Torah is a precedent for Torah. A person, like we always say, Shulchan Aruch says, the Gemara before the Shulchan Aruch says, Ha'echel bashuk. I'm sorry, I don't mean to, God forbid, to embarrass anyone, but just reflect. The Gemara says very simply, Ha'echel bashuk doime lekela. Someone who walks in the street and eats, he is likened to a dog. What does the Gemara say? I care where you eat. Oh, you care whether it gets insulted, right? You care if I eat kosher. I eat kosher. It's 100% kosher. That's what it says in the Torah. This is what I'm supposed to eat for some reason. But why do you care if I'm walking, I'm standing? It's important to understand that if you fail to appreciate what a human being is, then you fail to be able to enact and to bring about the full scale of what your responsibility is. This is where the Yetzer Hara gets the better of you.
Gets what?
Gets the better of you. The Lashon in the Gemara is that the Yetzer Hara does not come to a person straight out go and commit, such and such a sin. The expression in the Gemara is Hayom oimer leikach, u'mocher oimer leikach, u'mocher oimer leilecha be'vid avodah zarah. One day he says thus, kach. Another day he says thus, and then he says go and avodah zarah. What is this kach and kach? So the Rebbe, I don't remember which, the Friedrich Rebbe, I think, said, one day the Yitzhak comes to him and says, this is okay, kach, this is all right. It's not a sin, it's okay. The next day he says, this is also okay. Once a person loses his human stature, his self-respect, on the simple level, this is okay, this is okay. Ultimately, what does it lead to? You lose totally your perspective of who you are. And what is the significance of your actions? And then it ends up in avodah zarah. What's avodah zarah? Nothing. This is a stone, okay, so what is it? My actions are insignificant. What did I do? It is imperative, absolutely imperative. Imperative is very important, without a compromise, that we appreciate and recognize that we are the core for which the world was created. This is what makes the world worthy of being created. And everything that we do, absolutely everything, is actually reflecting the godly presence. When we eat a piece of fruit, we make a bracha. We make a bracha. We spoke about this many, many times. What is this bracha? The bracha, people in the world, say, bless the food, right? That's the expression. Bless this apple, or thank the Meibershin for the apple. It's a completely different concept. The bracha is simply making a statement that I, as a Jew, am not eating an apple because it grew on the tree. It's not the tree that provided the apple for me. The animal can eat the fruit from the tree. I do not eat anything from the tree, from anything. I eat only that which Hashem puts in my mouth. So I eat the apple because Hashem said to me, this is for you to eat. As it says in the Chumash. That's the bracha. This is, in a certain sense, perhaps for those who have some kind of interpretations, we eat animals. Right? There are vegetarians who says, how can you eat an animal? It's a living being. So if we were going to eat animals, you're right. But we don't eat animals, we don't eat vegetables. We eat what God puts on our table. We have a completely different perspective on things. It's important to remember that every one of us is Odom with a big Aleph. At the same time, you have to remember that, the union for humility and so forth. But it's extremely important to recognize why did Hashem give you a Torah? Why did Hashem restrict you in 613 different mitzvahs? Restrict or empower you These are restrictions. The animal doesn't need restrictions. You need restrictions. That makes sense? The animal doesn't need a home. He can live in the cave and he's fine. No insult here. You're not really living up to your standard. No, live in the cave, it's fine. You human being, you have to have a home. What's the matter with you? Leave me alone already. Let me live like the animal. What's in it? The human being is a completely different presence in the world than anything else. And unless we keep focused, unless we keep cognizance of this reality, we are open to fall into a pit any time. We are human beings, are constantly walking on a tightrope. Every step we take, we can make a misstep. And if we consider this just a test, then we are liable very much to give up and say, forget about it. Let me just go down there, it'll be easier. But we will not do it. Because to walk this tightrope, this is our reality. This gives us a sense of the real, of what a human being is. We will not give it up for anything. This is, Mendel Futerfas. You all heard of Mendel Futerfas? If you didn't, I'll introduce you. Mendel Futerfas was a big chassid. In addition to being a big chassid, he was also quite agile and was capable. He was a gifted person. He was also actually capable of walking on tightrope. He didn't walk across the Grand Canyon, but he was able to walk on a tightrope. So he said that when you walk on the tightrope, it's extremely important. What's really primary, so to speak, in this whole exercise is keep your eyes on the target. If you start looking at the rope or down there, you're doomed. There's absolutely no way you can make it. You have to keep your eyes on the target. That can get you across. This is very significant because this is what a human being is. What keeps a human being up, like we always speak, standing on 2 feet instead of crawling on 4? It is recognizing the target, standing up to who he is, remembering that he has a godly spark, and all his duties are not duties. This is everything that's holding him up. This is what defines who he is. This is why his presence in the world is a human presence, is significant, infinitely more than that of the animals. So, in some way, your turn. I'll let you ask a question if you still remember it.
Yeah. You said a carbon shows how the world continues to belong to Hashem. So I'm wondering, how is this? Carbon.
Well, to elaborate on a broad scale is not in this purview, but very simply, As I said before, what is the significance of a human being going and take an animal? Why is he taking an animal? Why is he eating an animal? Is he taking the animal from the animal world, or is he taking the animal from God's hand? He's taking the animal itself is a statement that the world belongs to God. And he, the human being, is the only one who recognizes this. He's the only one who recognizes, who has this godly spark to recognize this truth. In his own life as well, as I said before. He wouldn't even eat an apple without remembering that this is not an apple from the tree. If he's an apple from the tree, then he's a scavenger. Right? And we don't want to be called scavengers.
Is that pretty much like the Gorman concept? Does that pretty much go for any time that we're doing like when we like do something for making a mitzvah and things like that? That's also showing on like the recognition that like Hashem owns everything?
Absolutely. When you give tzedakah, what's the point of you giving tzedakah to a stranger? Right?
Yeah.
There are two different ways that one can look at tzedakah. One is, I did a good thing. The other thing is, this is a real thing. I have the responsibility to help us out. Our general perspective is the second one. You understand? We feel absolutely responsible for everything in the world. Not only for Yidden, how for Goyim too. Not only for Goyim, for animals too. But we keep things in perspective. Take a look at these animal lovers, and this is upside down thinking, right? To go hunting is a human, perfectly well respected sport. It's a sport. To shecht an animal in a kosher way, that's cruelty to the animal. When you get involved in yourself, and you have no perspective of reality, you can come up with some totally upside down reasoning, and it makes sense to you. Baruch Hashem, we were spared that confusion, and we know that yes, we are very great. And we really believe in ourselves, and at the same time we are very humble, and we are not going to to slip off. We're going to stay the course no matter how hard, because that's what a human being is. He is here not for comfort and convenience. He is here to keep the world going. I'll tell you quickly. Just a little episode in our history. There was our yeshiva, I'm sure you heard of Chaim Brisker, Chaim Soloveitchik, the grandfather of the Soloveitchiks. He was a real yeshiva, a very, very, very brilliant scholar. But he was not just a scholar, he was also a Yerushalayim. He was also, he was going back, and he was a very close friend of the Rebbe Rashab. So the story goes that when he became a little aged and older, it was difficult for him to give his shir. He would give a shir once a week or whatever it is. It was difficult. Physically, it was very taxing. And his friends, his Talmidim, urged him that he should take it easy. He should skip. You should not give a shiurim that often, whatever, not give any more shiurim. So Reb Chaim Brisker gave the following response. He said that the world is a pyramid. A pyramid. Except, contrary to physical pyramid, which is held up by its bottom, it's a pyramid that's held up by its top. There are those yeshiva bochum, those who will learn Torah lishma. This is the top of the pyramid. The next rung are those who learn Torah, but at the lower level, at the simple level, not so with such diligence. Below that are those who learn Torah for a particular purpose. Below that are the balabatim who follow the mitzvahs and so forth, and go all the way down. Below that are people who hardly do any mitzvahs, but they're also held up. They also have a sense of ruchnius. They're also held up, but that keeps them, so to speak, in line. Going all the way down, he says, then there are the Rothschild. In those days there was a Rothschild. Now the Rothschild family is lost completely, Rahman to the Jewish people. But Rothschild is a very prominent Jewish family in Europe. But at that time already the Rothschilds were so prominent, they were so wealthy, and they were so all over the place that they began to assimilate. And what keeps the Rothschilds from converting? Their attachment, they're still attached to the Jewish people. So he says, in order that the Rothschild in Paris should not convert, I have to give my share. I have to hold up the pyramid. If I give up my share, then the whole world goes down one notch. And if you go through all the notches, by the time you reach Rothschild, he has to convert. There's nothing to hold him. So, my dear friends, we are held up from the top. And we have to recognize that we have a very, very respectable, powerful top.
Top of what?
Top.
Top.
Odom, with a big olive. The Rebbe once said in Fabrengen, that if a person would ask a question, why am I different than my neighbor? My neighbor, referring to the Goyish neighbor. My Goyish neighbor, he can live whatever, whatever his heart desires, whatever the world provides for his experience, he's right there. Why am I different? So the Rebbe said, all he has to do is reflect on who are the ancestors of his neighbor, who are his ancestors. And this is what the Rebbe presented then. While your ancestors, Avraham, was walking around the world, screaming out and teaching the world about God, your neighbor's ancestors were eating raw human flesh. So, are you comparing yourself to them? It's very important to remember. This is the strength to keep us online. The strength to keep us on the path and not be swayed by anything untoward in the world is an internal strength recognizing who we are and where we're going and what our destiny is. So, remember the big Aleph. Remember also, equally important, maybe more, the small Aleph. But first you have to have a big Aleph, then you can use a small Aleph. If you don't have a big Aleph, then there's no point. Hatzlacha, bracha. Of course, I don't know if next year we're going to have, I don't know what the story is.
Right now, one quick question I have. Speaking about the pyramid, if he dropped a share, it's very good that one. What if he increased the share?
What?
What if he gave one extra share?
That's right.
Everyone up one.
That's right.
So now you're just wishing to get the rush to be just like him.
The Rebbe, in the early years, the Rebbe was covering once a month. Shabbos and Baruch. Very early, Shabbos and Baruch. The Farbrengen lasted exactly 2 hours. 1:30 till 3:30. It was almost predictable. Then the Farbrengen is kind of extended. You didn't know when the Farbrengen is. Then it came that you don't know when it's going to Farbrengen. Farbrengen came sporadically. We don't know. We waited till after davening to find out there's going to be Farbrengen or not. Then towards the last years, there was granted that it's going to bring in every Shabbos.
Just worked out that way.
Yes, it worked out that way. It worked that way.
It wasn't planned.
What?
It wasn't planned to work that way. It just happened. Famous.
No. Nothing but the Rebbe is not planned. To us, this is what
By the way,
it is.